Good evening, everyone that's here. Welcome to the Town of Harwich Board of Health for Tuesday, March 18th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. As required by law, the town may audio or video record this meeting. Any person intending to either audio or video record this open session is required to inform the chair. None. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order and start out with our public comment, which is...
So tonight we have Sarah Wigington from Barnstable County presenting on innovative alternative technology. Good evening, Sarah. How are you?
Good evening. I'm doing really well. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yes.
Great.
And there should be an option for you to share your screen.
You need a
Great.
higher chair.
No, I want to move that thing because it's right in mine.
Oh, your name tag?
Get your name tag down.
Can't reach it.
There you go.
Is it showing my presentation or a different screen?
Not yet.
Oh, all right. I think maybe I told it to share the wrong screen. How's that?
We got it.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. I really appreciate it, especially the chance to present hybrid. That's very, very helpful. So my name is Sarah Wigington. I am the Deputy Director for the Wastewater Division at Barnstable County. I'm also the Program Manager for the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center. And tonight we're going to talk about advanced septic systems, and I'm going to give just an overview and take any questions that you might have. So first, a quick overview of the wastewater division. There are 3 programs in our division. The first is the Cape Cod Aqua Fund. This is our low and no interest loan program to support Cape Cod residents to do wastewater upgrades. That includes septic and sewer. The next is our newest program, the Septic Utility Program. This was created to help towns meet their watershed and wastewater planning goals. And then the oldest program, the one that I manage, the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center. So just a little bit of history about advanced septic systems in Cape Cod. It was really the early 90s when nitrogen began to be on everybody's radar as a problem in our estuaries. It was in the late 90s that technologies began to come on the scene to try to deal with these issues. And that is when MassTC opened, was 1999. And really the impetus behind opening MassTC was to provide a third-party testing facility for the treatment technologies that were coming on the scene. They wanted to make sure that there really was nitrogen removal, specifically in these nitrogen removing systems. So in the 2000s, technologies began to be established to deal with nitrogen. And in the 2010s, we get more and more of those technologies. So now we're working with, really trying to hone in on almost complete nitrogen removal, and we're also looking at other sorts of pollutants and those sorts of technologies to, remove the things we're just starting to worry about in our wastewater. So the reason that we have advanced wastewater systems is because of high levels of nitrogen in our wastewater. And we really get a lot of nitrogen going to our wastewater when we have substandard treatment. And that really was the case, especially pre-1977. Before 1977, the only thing that was required in a house was a cesspool, which is really just kind of a glorified hole in the ground. There was very, very, very little treatment. It's not good for public health, definitely not good for the environment. In 1977, the code Title V was upgraded to require a septic tank and a little bit better final treatment with a leach pit. And then another upgrade was made in 1995, and that required a lot better treatment in the final treatment. Gonna get my pointer out here. The leach field soil treatment area was really the big addition in 1995. You also have an addition of a distribution box. So more elements that are doing more to safeguard human health and the environment. There is still very limited treatment of nitrogen in these systems, though. So 1995, these did a great job removing pathogens that really took care of any residual human hazard that was in play in the septic system wastewater. But then we still had the nitrogen, because really these standard leach fields, the Title V leach fields, they do almost nothing to remove nitrogen, very low removals in those. So a couple of years ago, DEP upgraded Title V to require nitrogen removal technologies in the natural resource nitrogen sensitive areas, which is most of Cape Cod. And the reason that, they required this is because we really do have a very serious problems in our waterways. We make local and global news, and it, doesn't make us look great. It's not great for tourism, and it's just not great for the environment, not great for the people who live here. There are many solutions to our nitrogen problem. One of our most obvious ones is wastewater, because that is the majority of our problem. We don't have a ton of agriculture, but things like cranberry bog restorations, that's an example of another tool in the nitrogen removal toolkit. This is from the Cape Cod Commission, and it's really just supposed to show basically every type of technology you could use to reduce, remediate, and restore systems that have nitrogen pollution going to them. And we're really focused at MassTC and the wastewater division about reduction. So we're really in this first tier, and we focus a lot on these innovative, alternative, or advanced nitrogen removing systems. So just a little bit of background on what this actually is. I know that probably people hear the IA term thrown around a lot. It actually stands for innovative and alternative. I like to use the term advanced because these technologies have been around for a long time, 30 years or so. So I don't really consider them innovative anymore. And they, in a lot of places, are kind of the law of the land. So they're not really alternative either, but they are advanced, especially when you compare them to more conventional treatment.
Sarah, can we ask a question real quick?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. Can you go back to the slide previous to this?
Sure, yeah.
So the section that we're looking at is the reduction section, which is the I'm going to call it blue section, going across the top. What's the difference in the different, not individual ones, but in the columns themselves? Is there a difference?
In the columns, not the rows?
Yeah, or does it go by rows? I didn't know which way to read this.
Oh, sure. So I don't think that there is any grouping in the columns, but the rows are grouped. The blue section is reduction, and that really is the best solution. It's usually the most cost-effective solution, is to just reduce the amount of nitrogen that's going to a system. Remediation is the next step, and that's things that will make the natural system better. So, you've got constructed wetlands, fertigation wells, and those sorts of things, stormwater management. And then restoration is, I guess, sort of top tier gold standard, and of course, most expensive, is to try to take the natural system back to what it was before it got thrown out.
Within the blue section at the top, within the reduction section, how do we interpret what is in that section? I mean,
It's the blue.
yeah.
All the blue.
Yeah, like you have, there's, they're talking, I'm trying to read this. Hydroponic treatment,
Toilets.
toilet incinerating, fertilizer management. What are we supposed to be taking from that section? It's not clear.
Yeah. So I'm sorry if I overwhelmed you with information on this slide. The point of this is that the Cape Cod Commission has done, I maybe should have zoomed in on what we're going to focus on, because the Cape Cod Commission has done tons and tons of work on what can reduce nitrogen. And that's all of this list. All of these are, again, tools in the toolbox to reduce nitrogen. But we're going to focus just on basically these couple of items, the innovative alternative systems and then the innovative alternative enhanced systems. And, we also do a little bit of composting and urine diverting, but the rest of these are just other examples. And I do encourage anyone who's interested to go check out the Cape Cod Technology Matrix. It's very, you can click on, this is more interactive too. I think you can click on things and get more information about each of them.
And in this blue section, there's really only then 2 IA systems.
Yes. So you've got the innovative alternative systems, and that is the systems that are sort of like old gen.
All right.
So anything that has the approval for 19 milligrams per liter or less in the effluent. And then this is a new category, innovative alternative enhanced systems. And this is the ones that get 10 milligrams per liter or less in their effluent.
All right, now
And this is what EPA has designated as the new standard.
Okay, now I can follow this. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And like I said, not meant to take every single piece of this, but it is a great tool if you're interested in learning about any more of these. But yeah, zeroing in on these.
All right.
So the IA systems, again, innovative alternative. Again, I like to use the term advanced just because the innovative alternative suggests that they are brand new technology, and they're really not. We are perfecting them, and we have this new enhanced category that does do a better job. That's really just more of the next gen of the IA septics. And when we really mean nitrogen removal, usually when we're talking about IA septics in this part of the world, because Cape Cod we care about mostly nitrogen in our especially estuaries, but it's really anything that does more treatment over a conventional septic system. So that includes phosphorus removal treatment systems and other sorts of pathogen removal systems. But again, we really think about it as nitrogen removing systems because that's where the regulations are and the real issues are in our habitats. So Mass DEP has 3 levels of approvals for their IA technologies. The first is the piloting phase, and this is where you can have up to 15 of your advanced systems installed, and this is really just intended to field test new technologies. Will it work? Will it not? You can install more than 15 though. The provisional use allows you to install up to 50 systems, and this is supposed to identify, and verify new technologies. If you are a technology that has a lot of data in another state or something like that, you have a lot of data somewhere else, you can go to DEP and they may grant the technology straight provisional use. You might not have to go through the piloting phase. And then there's general use. That's a system that's been verified and it gets general state approval. To get the general use approval, you have to monitor those 50 systems for a full 3 years. And the general use doesn't kick in until the 50th system that was installed has 3 years worth of data. So it's quite a haul to get to general use. With the new regulations in 2023, they also, DEP, they identified another category of IA technologies, and this is the best available nitrogen removal technology. So there are a lot of technologies out on the market, many approved by DEP, but these are the 4 systems that they have said get the best treatment. 2 of them are generally used systems. That's the Advantex and the Septitech, so they have general use approvals. And they're those sort of older gen. They're approved for 19 milligrams per liter or less of nitrogen in their effluent. And then there's also 2 provisional use technologies, the Nitrex and the Nitro, which have an approval for a lower standard of 10 milligrams per liter of nitrogen. And this is, again, all available on DEP's website. They list all of the general approvals as well as the information on, they're calling it the banner, the best available nitrogen reducing technology. Are there any questions about DEP approvals or anything in those last few slides before I go on to a slightly different topic? So those systems all have requirements to be sampled and maintained. The ones that are generally approved most often have a once-a-year sampling requirement, and the quarterly approved ones have, in general, 4-year, or the provisionally approved ones have, you have to sample them 4 times a year, quarterly. All of that data is submitted by O&M operators, private operators, to the Barnstable County IA database. So the data is submitted to us, and then we sort of house it. There is over 4,500 permits. in the database currently, and this map shows sort of the spread of the different systems. The bigger the dot is, the more systems are in that town. So you can see there's a whole lot, you know, there's many in Falmouth, there's many in Bourne, on the islands. So this is the breakdown for Harwich's IA systems. And just keep in mind, this is the data that we have. It's not always perfect. So we have 32 systems that have a general approval. So it's one of those systems that, again, generally approved. It's already been through its 50 system test. Remedial is just, you can use some specific types of systems if it's a repair system. Then there's one that's provisional, 8 that are pilot, and then there are 13 that are unknown. Again, just imperfect data. If the operator doesn't enter it in and we don't, you know, catch it, then it stays as unknown. Counts by property type. Single family house, 29, multifamily house, about 10, and quite a few commercial. All right, this is always very interesting to folks. Just an interesting thing to think about. Interesting question is occupancy. So there are 36 year-round systems, 6 seasonal systems, and 17 unknown. And we really don't feel super confident a lot of times in the reported use, whether they say seasonal or year-round, because sometimes seasonal homes are used more like year-round systems and vice versa. So the data in the database is almost exclusively total nitrogen. And this is just a little background information. In this case, we usually sum 3 different forms of nitrogen: total killed nitrogen, nitrate, and nitrite. So someone will collect at the end of the system 3 different sample bottles, take it back to the lab analyzes for these different types of nitrogen, and then they add it together, and that's the total nitrogen value that's reported in the database. The data is publicly available. This is another site I'm not going to walk you through every single one of these technologies, but I do encourage you that if you're curious, you go to masstc.org/technologies, and you can click on any one of the technologies. It'll take you to a technology page that has information about the approvals, and it'll also take you to some data.
Do the colors mean anything?
No, they don't. I think they're just in order of, a scale. And the systems are listed alphabetically. So all of the data that is on that page and that I'm going to go over in a slide or two is going to be based on box and whisker plots. If you've never looked at a box and whisker plot, the most important thing to take away from them is that this line in the middle is the median value, which is basically the most common value. It's usually very close to the average. So if you want to know about how a single system is doing, you can look at this line on a graph in a few slides, and that will tell you about how the system is doing. In the graph that we'll look at shortly, each one of the systems has its own box graph. So each box is made up of the data from one single address. And the 50% of the data is in the box, and the other 50% is the 25% is the maximum and 25% is the minimum. Really just shows you a spread of the data. And again, the thing, if you don't want to think about any of that, if you just want to think about the main takeaway, you want to look at the middle line in these boxes on the graphs I'm about to show you. All right, so I will leave this up for a while because I know it is a whole lot of data to throw out, and I'll walk everybody through it. So this is the performance of all of the systems that are in Harwich. The y-axis is total nitrogen in milligrams per liter. So we have all the way from 0 up to 150. This black line that goes across the middle is 19 milligrams per liter, which is, again, what a lot of these systems are designed to perform to. That kind of gives you a baseline of, where you should be looking for good performance. And then on the x-axis is each individual IA system. So this is an IA system, and every data point that's been collected for that. This is a single IA system. this one, every one of these is a single IA system. And these boxes make up all the data that have been collected for the total nitrogen for each system. So for this specific system here, again, we'll look at the black line, and that tells us that in general, this system performs at about 10 milligrams per liter, which is a good performance. And then if you kind of zoom out and look at the big picture, you've got about half of the systems in town doing the 19 milligram per liter goal for, because most of these, I think all of these systems are sort of old gen and approved at the 19 milligram per liter standard. And so you've got about half of the systems that have the median value below that line.
Sarah, just a quick note, for the 19 parts, that's more for residential properties than
Okay.
the expected commercial. Is that an accurate statement, would you say? That the 19 parts, that they're looking for that to be met at residential properties, not necessarily?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a specific approvals for each of these technologies. And that's a really good point. There are, and that's a very good point. There
Just
are
looking at some of the
several
property
these that are
addresses that
commercial.
are above,
Yeah.
they're more commercial
That's a very, very
applications
good
than
point. No, thank you so
residential.
much. I'm glad you pointed that out. I should have broken this into two graphs.
No, that's,
No, that's.
I didn't
but
want people
yeah,
to think that
the-
Harwich properties were not performing as well as they should be, because they seem to be doing a good job. It's the more the commercial applications that are.
Yeah,
that are
no, I'm
wrong.
very glad you pointed that out. Yeah, and you've got a lot of really good performers too. So, and sometimes people can get really caught up on these, sort of commercial or not. And these are, there's a lot of systems that are doing really well. So what this tells me is, and it's a smattering of different technologies. So these systems can perform to these levels. And there's probably specific reasons for almost every one of these boxes. They're commercial. They maybe aren't getting the maintenance they need. Maybe they aren't getting some sort of corrective action. Maybe there's some sort of improper use. So again, the fact that so many are performing and well below the standard means that probably many of these could, if potentially.
I have another question for you before you move on to the seasonal versus year-round. Back on the Barnstable County IA database, where you have the permits, samples, and data points, when you're looking at the picture of the Cape itself, you've got the big blue dots, and you've got little dark. What's the difference between the colors?
It's on a scale. It's on a scale of the size. So the size and the shade of the blue. It shows how many there are. So the lighter the color, the more there are, and the bigger the circle.
Okay, so lighter and bigger, so they go together. All right. Okay, gotcha.
Are there any other questions about the system performance before I move on? All right, so now we are going to talk just a little bit about seasonal versus year-round home. It's something that comes up all the time, and it's a really interesting question. There's not a lot of data out there to support the assumption that seasonal homes don't start working until part of the way through the season. We don't really see any evidence in the database to support this, but we do see many systems struggle in late spring because of cold. And that's not specifically seasonal. That's basically many of these systems, because they rely on biological nitrogen removal, and the microbes, the bacteria, they really just slow down when it gets too cold. So, and we often see that it doesn't pick back up until late spring. And there haven't been very many side-by-side comparisons, and the couple that have been done don't really find a difference in overall environmental effect. And that's kind of what I want to zero in on, is the overall environmental effect of different occupancy patterns. So one thing that kind of confuses this whole conversation when we're talking about nitrogen pollution are the different ways that we can measure pollution, in this case, nitrogen pollution. So there's a concentration, and that's one way you can measure nitrogen. And that is just the amount of nitrogen in a given volume. So we often talk about the milligrams per liter, how many milligrams of nitrogen per liter of water. And so that's those samples that I described earlier. You know, you take a sample from the end of the IA septic system and you say there are 20 milligrams per liter of nitrogen in this liter of water. And the other way to measure nitrogen is loading. And that's asking a slightly different question. You're asking how much nitrogen is being discharged to a specific water body over a specific amount of time. And that's measured in kilograms per year. So the poundage over a period of time. And where the disconnect kind of comes into play is that concentration is how samples from IA systems are reported and being required to, sampled in this way. And loading is what total maximum daily loads are based on. And that is what towns are being, expected to meet in their comprehensive watershed management goals is the TMDLs. So again, there's a bit of a disconnect between what we're measuring and what the tools we're using to address the problem. And to illustrate this, I have a little bit of a visual. So there are two households, and we're going to pretend that household one is a single person living year-round on the Cape. Person two, or family two, house two, is a family of 3 people, and they also live year-round on the Cape. They both have IA systems, someone goes to sample it, and both systems come back at 15 milligrams of nitrogen per liter. So these both are below the 19 milligram per liter standard, so these systems are working the way that they were intended to work, meeting that standard. But if we start thinking about how much nitrogen is being loaded to the environment from these two different houses, it's a slightly different story. So again, house one, 15 milligrams per liter, but only putting in 500 liters a day. House two is using 1,500 liters per day, so much higher water use, in which with each liter of water, 15 milligrams of nitrogen go out. So on day one, you're loading a little bit more to the water body, to the groundwater from house two. And you can see how this sort of builds over time so that after 4 days, house one has loaded only 30 grams of nitrogen and house two has loaded 90 grams of nitrogen. And that's because there's more flow. More water means more nitrogen loading. So we're going to imagine the exact same scenario, but in this situation, there's a little bit of potential dilution going on in house two. They're using more water, so maybe their concentration is a little lower. House number one isn't using quite as much water, so they're actually over the 19 milligram per liter standard. That would be, not meeting the approval, where this one is, house two is still meeting the approval the way the IA was intended to work. But after 4 days, 500 liters from house one and 1,500 liters from house two, you have still much more loading from house two, even though they had a lower concentration. So if we looked at that graph that I showed a few slides ago with the box plots, you would see house two and probably think it was the better performer, and maybe even assume it was loading less nitrogen in the environment. But you can't assume that because you don't know what the flow is. All right, so last hypothetical situation. In this hypothetical situation, it's the same house one as the last example. One resident, 500 liters, a concentration that's slightly above the approval. In this house, we're going to pretend it is an Airbnb at the very end of its rental period. It's Monday morning. The people are using quite a bit of water before they leave, doing laundry and stuff like that, but then they're getting out of there. So they're staying for just 1 day over this 4-day period, and they're using 1,000 liters in that 1 day, and their concentration is pretty high. So after the first day, of course, house two loaded more, but then the Airbnb cleared out and no one's there during the week. But house one still has a resident there putting in water every day at 22 milligrams per liter. So at the end of 4 days, they're almost even. Now, of course, you could do the opposite of this example and show the 4 days before this where every day house number 2 was loading, 40 milligrams at 2,000 liters a day because they're having parties at the Airbnb. But really, the point is, we don't really know what the total environmental effect is of seasonal homes because we don't really have enough water use information or enough performance startup information. But our sense is that we need to address the homes nearest to the water, especially, those Airbnbs that get packed. But a lot of the load comes from, people here every single day. So that's just, again, the environmental effect, comparing those. And that is the last section that I have. If there's any questions about the seasonal versus year-round loading or any of the other information.
You guys have any questions?
Yes, I have a question. It seems like we're using a lot of water. We're using a lot of water. So is that diluting in the summertime because so much water is being used? So,
Could be, yeah.
in other words, how much nitrogen is actually coming in because we're using so much water, it's all diluted?
Well, that is the question. We don't really, for most towns, we don't have that granular water use data. So we really don't know what the flow is to pair it with that concentration data. Because if you put it on a flow, it doesn't matter how low your concentration is. It doesn't matter how diluted it is. You're still going to be loading much more to the environment by using more water, even if the concentration is lower.
But they do check the nitrogen going into the embayments, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. So are you getting at the fact that we're using more water and we're more diluting it, that it's not affecting the embayments as much?
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking when she's looking at the loading
Yes.
per year, the whole effect of the amount of nitrogen in a year is what's going to affect the embayment, and they do check the embayment,
Okay.
not just,
Okay, that's the
I think that's what you're getting at.
Yes.
All right, okay.
Okay. Just want to clarify that.
Absolutely, up to the podium, Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick Otten, East Harwich. Wonderful presentations. Thanks so much for getting us to think about concentrations and loading. Never thought of it that way. But our water superintendent is very proud of Harwich water, our drinking water.
It is very good.
And as he should be. He recently stated that he was testing for nitrogen at our well sites and detected no nitrates and only 2.02 milligrams of nitrite.
Nitrites.
Nitrous?
Nitrites.
Nitrite, yeah, in the water. What does that tell you about Harwich water? Is there nitrogen in the water? Is there not nitrogen in the water? Should we be sewering? Should we not be sewering? I was confused by this data.
Fair enough. Yeah, so I would say that the nitrogen problem is not really a drinking water problem. Like, certainly you should not drink water that is contaminated with nitrogen, but we don't have levels that are right now, none of our, I think it is, I would agree that your water is good in Harwich. And yeah, it is important to test for nitrates, but this is really more an environmental problem more than a human health problem. And I didn't get into the sort of why we hear about nitrogen in this presentation, but the reason is because of all of the algal blooms that close the beaches, are dangerous for dogs, and are just kind of really gross and really bad for tourism, and are doing who knows what to the environment at large. But these are not, these regulations are not really intended, the new ones from Title V are not intended to protect drinking water. They're intended to be environmental regulations.
So I'm still confused just a touch here. How do we know that there is nitrogen in the water that's infecting our embayments? if we went down and sampled and found no nitrites and just very few traits.
It doesn't
When
take,
do you
it
finally
doesn't
say
take
we're
very
over
much.
I'm sorry. Yeah, when do you know that we're over the threshold and really need to take advanced steps?
Yeah, so I will say that is not my science. The Cape Cod Commission, I would say, look at their 208 plan. I think is very helpful, but there is a lower level threshold for environmental ill effects than the drinking water. And what level I think is different for each embayment. And that's why we have those TMDLs, the total daily maximum loads, because that is what tells you have a problem. If you're over those total daily maximum loads, which is, again, we're talking about putting a little bit in every single day, and that's where we get, to a problem in our estuaries, which again is a lower threshold than drinking water for what will throw it off or be dangerous.
And to help answer a little bit, I think the water that the wastewater and water superintendent is testing is treated water before it's sent to homes, where the estuaries and embayments are tested is a separate sample. So 2 different numbers you're looking at. One's treated water that's going to your faucet, and the other one is the water that's impacted by total nitrogen.
And I think the reason that they're concerned about the embayments is the way it's affecting, all right, the eelgrass and everything that's growing there. So that there aren't, like she's saying, there are 2.
More of environmental than.
Yeah, there's 2 different. So our drinking water is good. We want it to stay that way.
Right.
The other issue is what's going out into the embayments and affecting the ocean water.
But our drinking water is not part of that same water that's flowing out. It is.
It's treated water that comes to you first, though.
Yeah,
So it's
and
all
that's-
part of the water cycle,
Right.
but that is.
I had assumed the question was about well water, but I think we're talking about from a drinking water treatment plant.
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
and
got
those
it.
are the samples that are being reported through the water department.
I got
Yeah.
And that would
And
be
if
for
anyone
their
is on well
purview
water,
to
you should have
discuss
your
with you
well
then.
water tested for nitrogen.
the aquifer itself.
No, I think that's when they do the environmental testing, that's what's tested.
Good questions.
I think that's everybody's questions, and appreciate your time very much tonight,
Is
Sarah.
anybody online? No?
I think our next presenter's online.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless Leah has any questions, but I'm sure she would chime in if she
Sure.
did.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
It was excellent,
Sarah.
excellent.
Very interesting.
Very informative.
Very informative, thank you. So our next presentation is on the H5N1 avian bird flu by Leah Hamner. She is our epidemiologist from Barnstable County. Welcome, Leah.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being
How's
here.
it going? All right, let's see if this can work. Do you see slides?
I see slides.
See a bird,
A bird with a fever.
temperature.
Yes, so thank you for having me. Again, my name is Leah Hamner. I'm a contracted epidemiologist with Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment. And today, I'm going to be talking about highly pathogenic avian influenza. Another term you're going to see, it's kind of an acronym soup, so I put them all up here just to make it easier for us to follow. But there's HPAI, highly pathogenic avian influenza. There's H5N1, the specific type of flu that we're talking about. And then you also hear the layman's terms, bird flu. So this graphic does a very nice job of representing how the disease is transmitting and where the burden of disease is. H5N1 avian influenza is primarily affecting our wild birds. And And that is the natural reservoir for H5N1 is actually wild waterfowl. So we're talking about geese, ducks, gulls, shorebirds. And they are naturally carrying the virus and then transmitting it within each other, but they're also spilling over into chickens and poultry, as well as into dairy cows. That was a new development last year. And then those animals, poultry and dairy cows, have infected a few humans who've had close, prolonged contact with infected dairy cows and infected poultry. It also has been impacting cats. Cats' predatory nature is they go after birds and they can actually get infected from infected wild birds. And actually cats have been shown to be highly susceptible to avian influenza, house cats as well as big cats. And so there's been several cat fatalities in the United States. So something that pet owners should be aware of. This is data straight from the CDC website pulled down today, but the point that I'm trying to get across here is that the majority of impact, this is an animal adapted virus. This is really a bird adapted virus at this time. So many wild birds have been impacted. Millions of chickens have been impacted. And that's really where the name comes from, highly pathogenic avian influenza, is its devastating effect to poultry. And then the new development of 2024 was when dairy cows were getting infected and dairy cows were able to transmit. I'm going to talk about dairy cows more in a second. But again, the main impact we're seeing is still in birds, appropriately named bird flu. We have had substantial numbers of detections of highly pathogenic avian influenza in our wild birds in Massachusetts. We've also had significant die-offs, which are suggestive, even if they don't have necessarily all positive birds. From a die-off of 100 birds, 175 birds, it sure is likely that that's what they died from. And so this data has been collected by the New England Wildlife Center. And so this is from their hospitals about where they've heard of die-offs. And there have been outbreaks in mostly Canadian geese, mute swans, and mallard ducks. But they have certainly seen other types of wild birds positive, though not nearly in the quantities as those waterfowl. The waterfowl still are the main ones impacted. Now, one of the main talking points about bird flu is, again, its impact to poultry. And having wild birds near your chickens at this point in time is a bad idea. And so reducing the opportunity for wild birds to be using the same water sources as your chickens, covering your chicken runs, being very careful with your chickens, because chickens are extremely susceptible to this virus and they do not develop immunity, they just die. And so that is something that poultry owners should take very seriously to protect their flock. So free range chickens are not recommended right now. It is very highly risky to let your chickens free range, that they'll come into contact with an infected wild bird and contract highly pathogenic avian influenza. There have been 8 positive backyard flocks in Massachusetts since 2022. There have only been 2 positive backyard flocks this calendar year in 2025, one in Plymouth County and one in Dukes County, which is Martha's Vineyard. When a backyard flock or a commercial flock tests positive, or actually first order of business is a flock owner notices their chickens are sick or chickens are dying. And so first step is to report. The website is mass.gov/report poultry. And that is really important so that the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, MDAR, can then deploy and test those birds and assess the situation to see if it is avian influenza. And if it is avian influenza, it's going to spread rapidly among the birds. And so actually the intervention is to depopulate, to euthanize the flock immediately. MDAR responds, MDAR takes care of the euthanization, does it safely, wearing their personal protective equipment. They take all the carcasses, they take the feed bags, and they remove it all from the environment. And then that actually, because the chickens with highly pathogenic avian influenza, it's all in their GI tract, and they're all usually focused in a very small footprint, a chicken coop. And so when they're infected, they're shedding a lot of virus in that coop. And actually, the poultry owner needs to not bring new birds, which are, again, highly susceptible to this virus, back into that coop for 120 days. 120 days is the longest. That's the most cautious timeline about highly pathogenic avian influenza because chickens are so susceptible. And there's so much virus in that coop when there were infected birds in there. In general, highly pathogenic avian influenza in the environment, I can't give you a hard and fast timeline for how long it persists because it does depend a lot on UV exposure, so exposure to sunlight, exposure to heat, and exposure to dryness. Those three things cause the virus to degrade faster. So we usually do see less transmission of highly pathogenic avian influenza in wild birds as the weather warms up. But for the last 3 years, because this is the same strain that's been circulating in North America in our wild birds for 3 years now, we see outbreaks and increase in our wild bird population in wintertime. And then it seems to get better in summertime. And so we're hoping it does the same thing, but something to be aware of. In Massachusetts, a very important thing to know is that not a single one of our commercial dairy cows have tested positive for a highly pathogenic avian influenza. They have certainly had cattle detections in other states, California being most heavily impacted. And our state actually has been testing all commercial dairy farms in the state since August of last year, monthly. And it's mandatory testing. And all of those farms have resulted negative. So that's a great assurance. But you can also see from this map that actually there's no cases in New England, there's no cases in the Northeast. So hopefully it stays that way. But why do cows matter? It's because it's the first evidence of mammal to mammal spread of highly pathogenic avian influenza. Turns out, surprise to everyone, that there's actually very similar cells in the udders of milking cows that the virus replicates in. And so it can replicate in high concentrations and effectively contaminate milk. And so that milk, if you've seen pictures of milking plants, and I'll show you one in a bit, people are really close to milking machinery. The cows are put in very close in the milking parlor, so then it spreads from cow to cow. The cows aren't that sick. The cows actually just showed decreased milk production, and of course, if you're running a dairy farm, you're going to pay attention to decreased milk production, so you'll know when your cows are symptomatic. But other than that, the cows are not dying, and it's not affecting beef or anything like that. And they did extensive studies upon realizing that cows were getting infected about whether pasteurization does kill the virus, and the answer is it does. So still, it is a recommendation of public health and always will be a recommendation of public health to not drink raw milk and to consume pasteurized dairy products. On to humans. Short end up front is that there have been 0 cases of human infections of highly pathogenic avian influenza in Massachusetts or the Northeast. In the human infections that have happened, the exposure is close, prolonged contact with infected animals. You can see from these photos what kind of exposure we're talking about. People who work in giant chicken processing facilities and growing facilities have a lot of contact with chickens, and same thing with dairy cows. We're talking about close, intimate contact with infected animals. This is a timeline that actually goes back nearly a year at this point to March of 2024 of just all the human cases in the Americas. And they've all, except for one case, been in the United States. So that's our surveillance system doing what our surveillance system is meant to do, where we're picking up even on mild cases of highly pathogenic avian influenza, which I'll show you in a second how mild they are for most people. There's a big caveat on that though. And we have seen cases increase, especially when the dairy cow outbreaks took off in the fall. I'm hoping you have these slides potentially printed and so that you're not having to squint to see this, but I can distribute them also afterwards. But this is a really helpful graphic to show you what the most common symptoms are of the 71 human cases that have happened in the Americas, 70 of them being United States cases. So most of these cases have had conjunctivitis, which is red irritated eyes, and some people have only had conjunctivitis. Fever, cough, headache, myalgia, which is body aches, sore throat, and then we get to a serious symptom, which is shortness of breath. But that is much fewer cases than we're talking about, mostly mild illnesses. There has been one death in the 71 cases in humans in the Americas, so that's a 1.4% mortality rate. I do call that out because I have seen some old data recirculated and some improperly cited data circulated, but one death out of 71 cases is a 1.4% mortality rate for what we know now. And in other countries, mortality rates have been higher, but we don't know how many people have been actually infected with different types of country surveillance systems. They might not be as robust as the United States is. So here's a map of where those human cases are. Again, you'll notice that there are no cases on the eastern seaboard, and I'm gonna knock on wood right now. But there have been 70 confirmed cases, 7 probable cases. I won't bore you with the differences, but that's where epidemiologists live, between the land of confirmed and probable. But we pay a lot of attention about what our evidence is for any known infection. But here on the left, you can see that the majority of individuals have been infected from infected dairy herds, working with those milking cows that have been infected. And then the second biggest group is the people working directly with poultry farms and culling operations. So when they're actually exterminating infected flocks. So unsurprisingly, working with prolonged contact with infected animals is a risk, and proper protective equipment should be worn. 2 individuals were exposed from other animals, which does include wild birds and backyard flocks, not commercial poultry operations. And then 3 humans we did not figure out as a public health system where they were exposed. And there haven't been changes in this case count for a couple weeks now. It stayed at 70. There have been no new cases identified in the last couple weeks. Overall, we have a pretty huge operation of flu surveillance in the United States. Pandemic flu preparedness is part of the U.S. Pandemic Preparedness Plan. And so there is a lot of flu surveillance mechanisms happening year to year. And so from our national flu surveillance system, they actually have been able to find 6 cases. But most of the individuals that we've found that have tested positive have been through targeted surveillance, AKA meaning we know that they were working with infected animals. We found out that that farm had decreased milk production, and so then the animals got tested. They did have highly pathogenic avian influenza. They monitored those people, and lo and behold, they ended up getting sick. Again, potentially super mildly with just maybe conjunctivitis. So at this point, the key takeaways is that there is no evidence of person-to-person spread, which is good. We want to keep it that way. And the current public health risk to the general public remains low, but people who work with infected animals definitely need to be cautious. And there have been 70 human cases in the United States and 1 death. This is the same talking points just written out, except for the last piece that I haven't said out loud, except for the milk, is that the food supply is safe. And food safety recommendations are the exact same as they were before highly pathogenic avian influenza. You want to cook your chicken fully. You want to cook your eggs. You want to cook your beef to temperature. Nothing has changed about those recommendations. Those recommendations kill pathogens, period, including Salmonella and Campylobacter and E. coli. as well as if there were any contamination issues with highly pathogenic avian influenza. It is not recommended to touch or consume raw milk or raw milk products at this time. And it is also not recommended to feed those things to your animals. There have been multiple pet cat deaths from being fed contaminated poultry products, raw poultry products. And so as a cat owner myself, we are not feeding our cats raw food right now.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, only because I get this question a lot. Going back to eggs,
Sure.
early on, there was a recommendation not to eat, I guess they call it easy over eggs, where the yolk is still, you could dip your bread in it. We call them
Runny.
dippy eggs.
Runny.
Yeah, runny, there we go. Okay. What's your take on that?
Eggs themselves are a sterile environment. The fetus of a chicken is in a sterile environment. It's an embryo. Where the contamination happens is on the outside of the egg, because it is the infection. If you did have an infected chicken, but first of all, infected chickens die very fast. So the likelihood of you getting a contaminated chicken product without someone knowing is low. But infected chickens are shedding the virus in their GI tract. It's the same tract that's producing those eggs. And so certainly if you're buying farm stand eggs, potentially washing them off if they're dirty eggs before cracking them would be a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. All right, that was kind of my take on that, but somebody came back to me with, well, for a long time you weren't supposed to eat raw eggs because of the salmonella, but that salmonella got into the ovaries of the chicken, if I remember correctly, and that was not the same as what this flu is.
Correct. Yeah, no, it's in the GI tract of the chicken.
All right, that was my take on it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, great question, and a common one.
I get it.
One of the exposure risks that we are stressing to be careful is responding to sick or dead animals. Because highly pathogenic avian influenza is circulating widely in wild waterfowl in Massachusetts, and animals that come into contact with those birds or scavenge on them are also getting infected. We do have a recommendation that people should not, the general public should not be handling, especially sick animals. There's a higher risk from a sick, not yet dead animal exposing you through the interaction of it potentially flapping, moving, and then exposing you. It's very sad to watch an animal die, but please don't handle it. And then for dead animals, wearing personal protective equipment to dispose of that carcass is a recommendation. If you don't have these kinds of personal protective equipment, actually the workaround is to use a shovel. Don't touch it, but put a bag in a trash can next to your carcass, use a shovel, shovel the carcass into it, and that way you're not handling the animal. And also recommend to kill highly pathogenic avian influenza and disinfect for it. It's a 10% bleach solution is the gold standard, and you need to make that at home fresh each day, depending on how many times you need to use it. But it just can't be stored. But just with some bleach and some water, measure it out, and then you have a disinfectant. There is really nice materials on the state website that isn't just for animal control officers. It's actually written really well. Guidance for animal control officers responding to avian influenza mortality events and public inquiries. I like this document a lot. It's been helpful for DPWs, for DNRs, for a lot of different folks who are responding to these kinds of situations. And this is, I already actually said this out loud, and then here it is written out so you can have it too, about recommendations on how to potentially dispose of a carcass if you needed to safely. And then I did want to just mention that if someone were to be exposed to a known positive animal, we would then be wanting to follow up and just make sure they didn't get sick for 10 days after they were last exposed. The incubation period in humans is 10 days from last exposure. So that is a symptom monitoring process. We then follow up as public health entities with those people and just monitor their health. Hopefully they do not get sick. They also, individuals have the option to take a prophylaxis, which is Tamiflu. It's the same medication used to treat flu, and people can take it preventatively after exposure and before symptoms, but that is an individual's choice. And then if they do develop symptoms, they can be tested through their normal healthcare provider. Providers should be wearing eye and respiratory protection to test people for respiratory diseases anyway. We learned that during COVID to protect them, and it's the same protections for avian influenza. And then if they are positive, if we did have a positive human, they would ask to be isolated. We haven't seen human to human transmission. We would like to keep it that way. And then I do have a call out, because this is one of my most frequent questions by far, is about what the risk is from goose poop, because it's everywhere. And we're talking about potentially geese being infected. And this is a great question and a logical question, and I'm so pleased to be able to share an answer, because what happens is we haven't seen a single individual human infected from goose poop in the environment. And so that's really good news for all of us. If this was a significant source of exposure for people, we would have probably seen infections, because there's lots and lots and lots of birds, lots of geese, and lots of human geese interaction. And so really it is that close, prolonged contact with positive animals that is the concern. Just so you're aware about the preparedness efforts that we all are doing here on Cape and Islands, is actually 5 weeks ago I started a Wednesday routine office hours for bird flu. It brings together partners from wildlife as well as veterinarians when I can get them, and I present about human illness. And really it's this wonderful marriage of two very effective coalitions that have existed on the Cape for a long time. The Cape and Islands Health Agent Coalition, which has been around for over 20 years, and the Cape Cod and Southeastern Massachusetts Rabies Task Force, which has been more of our animal health colleagues and wildlife health colleagues, which has been around for 31 years. And so bringing those two groups together, we really talk about breaking down town lines and just sharing situational awareness, not only between towns, but also within our towns. We have our roles and responsibilities in making sure we're de-siloing information and making sure everyone's up to date on the latest. We're all interfacing with the public. We're all answering questions for the public. And so making sure that we're all on the same page about the latest science and as well as the best information has been really critical for preparedness. So that's been ongoing, and it's going to keep going until further notice, just to make sure that we're prepared. And then my takeaways is reporting is really, really important and helpful. Your vigilance, your community's vigilance about sick or dead animals, especially poultry, really helps us address a problem as soon as possible. So domestic birds, which are your chickens, your turkeys that you're raising, those should go to mass.gov/report poultry. And then wildlife should be reported to mass.gov/report birds. And if you end up on one of the report forms at the top of it, it will tell you, are you looking to report to this other form? Use this link. So you'll get to want the right place one way or another. We also have our own website, capecod.gov/birdflu. I keep that updated along with our communications coordinator to answer frequently asked questions. And I do have a couple more resources just to share as takeaways that I will send around with the slides afterwards. But these are great resources.
We're going to put these presentations too up on our website, so they'll be available for anybody who wants to refer back to them.
That's good.
Amazing.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Very interesting, thank you.
Thank you, Leah.
Very good.
very
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Extremely informative, and I think your slides did a great job of answering all of the questions that we're getting on a regular basis from the public, so thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you can, work
Okay.
session.
Minutes of the previous meeting?
Go to the work session.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to the work session, okay. So we're going to go to the work session.
Yes.
Okay, discussion. Citizen petition review with Patrick Oughton, reduce application of fertilizers. A,
So I think we can probably, where Patrick is the speaker on all of these, group them all together and
Okay,
just let
ABC.
Patrick get up and,
good, okay.
And I just want to say something to the board. Since this has come up every year, like, you can make the presentation, but as far as, if everybody agrees, we're not going to be voting on anything tonight.
Oh, all right.
Or, you know, just go ahead and make your presentation.
Well,
And the only thing is with the trees, that is not a health department issue, so we aren't going to do the trees. That really is not in our purview.
okay. The only impact the trees have on health are aesthetic and emotional.
That's really not something that the Department of Health gets into, the trees.
Okay.
So, yeah,
No, okay.
okay.
So I'm going, while, rather than have me repeat everything you already know, I'm here because of the environment, and that's my interest, okay? I think one of the most important impacts is what's the economic basis of Cape Cod? What is our vacation-based economy? What about our seashore ponds and woodlands? Why do we live here? What's unique about this very place we call Cape Cod? There's absolutely no other place in the entire world like Cape Cod. So what's this all about? What's the best thing that we can do for this? You can do nothing. It's probably the best thing you can do. Doing nothing at all. Start doing something by doing nothing and save Cape Cod. And what do I mean by doing nothing? It means don't continue putting fertilizers on your lawn. Stop. Do nothing. Don't fertilize your lawn. What about pesticides? Don't spread pesticides. Just stop. Don't do that. Why? Fertilizers contribute 15% to the decline of our water qualities in our bays, estuaries, and ponds. Is a significant reason not to be putting fertilizers on our lawns. Again, both the fertilizer petition and the pesticide petition is a home rule asking the state legislature to allow Harwich to set the boundaries of what can and cannot be done with respect to fertilizers and pesticides. I chose what Orleans had, and for fertilizers, the limit is use it on your gardens, use it on your flowers, plants, and vegetables, but not across your lawn. But commercial farmers continue as they have. If that needs to be amended, if that needs to be, corrected, we can do that once Harwich has the ability to set their own rules and regulations. Why? Because Harwich is so unique with our sandy soil and our single source aquifer. We're not the Berkshires. We're not Beacon Hill. So I'm just asking that you have the ability to set your standards. At one point you did, but had to rescind it, right? The fertilizer.
we enacted a fertilizer ban and had to rescind it because we didn't have.
Oh,
home
I see
rule.
what you were getting, yes, yes.
The state.
Yeah, because we weren't legally allowed to,
So this is asking the state to let us legally have the permission to set our own regulations.
And that doesn't mean necessarily that it would change. It's just saying that we would have the right to do it,
Yeah.
the legal right to do it, yeah.
So just a clarifying question, your petitions, your citizen articles, are you requesting a reduction, or are you requesting that the town appeal to the state to get the home rule?
Both. So I'm forwarding with the request to the state for the home rule petition what Orleans had, and that was a reduction of use of fertilizers. Okay? No longer full yard spraying of fertilizers. Commercial growers, yes. Homeowners, for your gardens, your fruits and vegetables, yes, but not widespread use of fertilizers, okay? And that can be changed. Maybe the state says, yes, go ahead, Harwich, you'll make your decision, and then let's amend it if it needs to be changed. That's okay with me. The state legislature can change it in their process. And by the way, so Eastham, Wellfleet, and Orleans, and Nantucket all have approved the request to ask the state for permission for them to make their own decision. It was not acted on in the last legislative session, so it's being reintroduced again in the state by those 4 towns to ask for home rule petition. Okay. Pesticides. The root word of pesticide is side, which means to kill, and that's exactly what they do. They kill everything. So the petition addresses outdoor use of rodenticides, fungicides, herbicides, and insecticides. Spraying outdoors affects yourself, your neighbors, your children, your pets, the birds, the bees, the chipmunks, the squirrels, snakes, salamanders, and whatever else is unfortunate enough to be in your yard. And that's a real issue, because we're losing what is important here in the Cape, our natural environment. There are exceptions. If someone needs to spray for poison ivy, you can get a waiver to do that, okay? Basically, it's saying don't do it on the outdoors. If you need mosquito protection, just like your brochure that is available downstairs on the rack, you apply it to yourself. You wear the proper clothing, okay? Same thing with ticks. Don't spray your entire yard. Put the protective clothing on, tuck in your socks, check your body, and use the repellent on you, not spraying the entire yard. Also, as I was here earlier for you, stop using rodenticides, which cause secondary wildlife poisoning in snakes, skunks, squirrels, foxes, coyotes, hawks, and eagles. Okay. To conclude, I think we just need to recognize and appreciate why we all live in Harwich. Harwich is our rural home, not a city, not a suburban area. Harwich's economic viability exists because of the resources we are destroying. The 3 citizens' petitions will help keep our behaviors aligned with our values and help protect our environment. That's the basis for me. So let's take care of where it is we live, and, okay? So
I think if things change and it needs to come back to the board, and who's ever, in charge at that time, if they want to bring it up for discussion, and change, then it'll happen. But as right now, nothing has changed. So,
by nothing's changed, what are you referring to?
as far as the home rule,
No. All 3 of those are worded exactly the same as they were last year, except for the fertilizers, I inserted the word garden, because it initially said home plants, fruits, and vegetables. It didn't say garden, meaning a flower garden.
All right.
Okay, so I inserted the word garden. But other than that,
the only thing I'm going to say to that is there are positives and negatives to everything we do.
yeah,
Everything we do, everything we eat, every medicine we take.
that's right.
So you need to keep that in mind when you start to look at these things. That's the only thing I have to say.
And I also make the comment about enforcement. Enforcement would be done exactly the way it's done today. Who's enforcing the current fertilizer law? That it can't be put on between November and April. Who's enforcing that? You know, it'll be exactly the same enforcement that would take place. And then there's always this issue, yes, you're a private citizen. Yes, you own your private property. Yes, you have to do whatever it is you want to do. Except Harwich has a code of conduct, 300 pages long, along with a mass state codes and federal codes of conduct, hundreds of pages long. Yes, you are a private citizen, but you also live in a society, so please do what's best for Harwich. Okay, so I just want to touch on the enforcement issue because that always comes up. It's going to take 10 people to enforce this.
Well, it would definitely be a challenge for any department that's faced with enforcing
Yeah.
on private property. It becomes a lot of looking over the fence, calling on the neighbor, and then we say it's the health department, shows up, and you can't confirm. You know, it's really creates, I don't know, tension amongst
Yeah,
neighbors.
no, I agree.
In the way it's enforced, and not saying that we don't want to see a reduction or we're not supportive, we're just looking at it from different angles. And then the other piece that we look at when we look at rodent control and management is how it impacts your food sources. Restaurants, we're in them all the time. You know, the rodents are on the heels of every restaurant in our community, and they need tools as well to manage
Yeah.
those because we want to protect the public health.
So here's another case.
We're not looking at
Yeah.
total bans. I would not think, it's, again, this, my opinion as the health director, not
Yeah.
that of the board, but that I would ask that to be taken into consideration when we're talking ban versus reduction is,
No, this is a reduction.
yeah.
And again, this is the first step to take. If it goes to the state and the state says, okay, it comes back to Harwich, let's do what's needed. Maybe restaurants are exempt. I didn't say that in this, but there are exemptions.
I think there's tools they still need access to, and if there's other means that they can combat whatever challenges they're up against,
Yeah.
and they're supportive of those, but I think complete removal of all their tools is,
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
there's always, there's always a balance.
No, it's as Sharon says,
yeah.
I mean, there's a plus and minus to everything we do, you know.
And you really, you know, when you look at the fertilizer, if the majority of the people are really not for fertilizing, they don't have to do it.
That's right.
We don't have to make a law or a regulation not to. If they're all in
This is-
agreement,
Right. But this is sort of part of the education,
yeah,
too.
it's
Okay.
the education.
All right.
I think the education is really more important.
Well,
Any
this is the
regulation.
education.
Yes,
I
exactly.
mean, the
Spreading the
bylaw is
message.
educating people. Oh, maybe I should think twice. I got 11 emails from True Green the past week. Spray your yard, spray your yard. Your yard will be better than anyone else's yard. All I have to do is click, and it'll happen,
Yeah,
you know? So, you know, it's that type of commercial
yeah, yeah,
pressure that this will resist,
yeah.
right?
So like I said, I think education is really where most of that is at.
Yeah, and I think the bylaw is education. You know, what about noise?
Yeah.
You know, what about stopping at stop signs?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
It's all education.
Those are laws.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and there's penalties there, so, yeah.
So-
But we have police that enforce that. We don't have a whole lot of health people, yeah.
No, but I think people with this will understand and will stop at stop signs instead of saying, oh, there's no cop there, I'm going to go.
I see some of those.
And we're trying to promote some of your messaging
Yeah.
too through our garden.
Yep,
And the measures that we're taking to care for and use a garden. And we are bringing experts out to educate the community as well. So when
Yeah.
you hear of our events and you know people who could listen to that messaging and you want to
Yeah.
encourage them to come out to our educational events, we would,
so where do I
Love
find
that.
that? Because I've been asked, Noreen Donahue had sent to me, exactly which fertilizer can I use in my garden? Give me the brand name. I don't know.
so we held a pesticide and soil management, or alternative to pesticides and soil management educational event last spring. and we didn't have any residents come out for it.
Whoa, ouch.
Yeah, 2 nights, we had our Russ Norton from
Yep, no, Russ is excellent.
Barnstable County came out and talked about alternative methods. This year, we do not have an exact date yet, but it will be going up on our website, so if you want to follow us for news and announcements on
Yeah, yeah,
the
okay, yeah.
department's website, we will post it when we have further information.
Now, when they do that, can they provide some sort of slides that we can put something on the website then? Mm-hmm. So that would be, then we can say, you know, the website would give you, for like what Noreen was asking, you know, what fertilizers can I use? If we have that available for the people, I think you're more likely to get compliance when people want to do
Yeah,
something.
right.
And you give them the tools to do it, you're going to get what you want.
Right.
Yeah. So,
In the wording in the fertilizer says it must be organic to whatever standard USDA blah, blah, blah
Yeah.
code is, but that doesn't mean anything to people like you and me. You know, Noreen wanted, give me the exact brand name that I
yeah,
can use.
yeah, yeah.
So I don't know.
Exactly.
All right.
Yes. So,
All right, so I'm here once again just to say, please, take your vote, and hopefully you'll support it.
and the education, I think the education and people hearing it is going to do more
Yeah.
than any regulation is going to do. I really do.
But the regulation is all part of
It's
the
part of it.
education, too. It's all, you know,
Yeah.
we had to take driver's lessons before we get, you know.
Yeah.
so-
True.
No,
So, all right.
All right, I appreciate your time.
All right,
so
well,
that-
thank
yeah,
you
Thank you,
again.
Patrick.
And if I can help in any way as well, let me know.
Yeah,
All right,
we're always looking for volunteers with the garden and education, so,
all right. Put my name down.
okay,
And Sky.
okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I appreciate it, thank you.
Okay,
So I don't know, again, if you want to take the next one out of order, so we can get new business.
oh, what, go to the old unfinished?
Get to new business first, and then we can go back up to the minutes and,
Yes. So that would be the,
Oh, the new business,
the
okay.
site assignment for
Site assignment.
671 Route 28 Christchurch
That's kind of
Episcopal.
easy.
right, new business.
Yep.
Right.
So request for approval of a memorial garden or memory garden?
Memory garden.
Memory
Oh,
garden.
memory.
Trust me, we go through that all the time.
I believe it.
Memory.
Want me to say something?
Yep, so if you want to stand up at the podium and introduce yourself. I think this is a pretty straightforward request that.
I hope so.
Yeah,
Should be.
Keep you short tonight. I'm the Reverend Donna Foudy, and I'm currently the rector at Christ Church. We have a very small memory garden where we have interned the ashes of a number of people. The garden was created in 1983, long before my time. And at that time, the rector sent a letter to, if I can find them, sent a letter to the environmental people at the state level and received a letter back. You should have a copy of that saying they didn't have a problem with installing a memory garden. And then he sent a letter to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. We have no record of him getting a response from them. So I came into this mainly because the diocese, the Episcopal Diocese has had a challenge with a cemetery north of here where the church sold the building and the cemetery, and the new church that bought that didn't want the bodies there, of course, much bigger deal. And so the diocese had agreed to move the bodies to another cemetery, except two families argued about that. And so the 7-year lawsuit, again, before my time, I've only been here 5 years, culminated in them being able to move the bodies over the objections of the family. But then they came out to all of us with memory gardens and cemeteries and all this other stuff and said, please make sure that you are blessed by your Board of Health and whoever else needs to bless you so that we don't have to do this again. And so that's basically, I guess you might call it being grandfathered in. If you have the little map, it's a very small space.
Makes two of us.
There was a seminary and the bishop, one of the bishops had us count off. We couldn't even get past 7 before the seminarians lost it. So if you look at the map over here, we have the church, we have a parish hall, and a thrift shop office area, and our little memory gardens right here. Can you see it?
Does it occupy that whole space, or is it
Yeah,
just
it's really a tiny space.
Okay.
It's not very big at all.
And how many remains do you have in there currently?
Oh, let's see, you asked me that. I am maybe 30, 25 to 30.
Okay.
They use urns, they're just in the ground. They have
Like-
plaques over them.
Okay.
You know, I guess
So the plaques identify exactly where they're located?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the plaques identify exactly where they are. And as far as I know, there are no ashes there that are not identified with the plaque. But like I said, this is before my time. The history of it is, nobody seems to know the history of it besides the information I have given you, and that rector has passed on. So, but as far as I understand, that's, there's nothing that's just been scattered on the ground or anything. They're all in certain spots.
Do you maintain a certain setback from the road of the remains?
Oh, well, yeah, it's quite a ways from the road.
Okay.
Because if you look at where the church is, I mean, so the church is here and the road is way over here. And so you have the church building and a whole rather large area front where we have our flags and everything. And then between the church and this back building is just
So I think
quite a ways off the road.
the only other requirement is if the board approves a pre-existing memory garden to cross their Ts and dot their Is legally, that we would draft a letter of approval, and that would have to be recorded on the deed, so,
Right.
at the registry of deeds, so that's,
So is that something you do then?
that would be something we would draft after the meeting, so that's tomorrow's workload.
Now, can the three of us vote on that since
Yes,
there's three?
yes, you can. You have a quorum.
We have a quorum.
We have one, but we have them.
Okay.
I propose we vote to draft the request from Christ Church to grant,
So it would be moved to approve
Move
if
to
that's the
approve.
decision that you want to make, the site assignment.
Any second?
Second,
Vote?
yes.
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 Okay.
Thank you for your time and patience.
Send us a copy of that letter. I'd like to bring all of our paperwork up to par so that we have everything accurate and we don't, 'cause nobody else down the line has to go through finding stuff in old dusty files. Thank you very much.
It's the only approval letter, so it'll be done tomorrow and either mailed out to you, or you can come pick it up, or however you would like to handle that.
I do have one question. I don't know if you know the answer. Should that site be resurveyed?
It wouldn't be a bad idea to
Okay.
have all of the plots surveyed, and so
Okay.
you would designate a certain amount of area for each individual, and you know how many you can sell and
Right,
how many remains you can fit in there.
okay, okay. So by a professional surveyor, you're saying?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And then they can give you a nice plot map that you can
Excellent, thank you.
Yes.
I've only dealt with historic cemeteries in Virginia, and that's a whole different ballgame. When you have to plant somebody next to somebody who was buried in 1750, it's a whole different world.
Oh, yes.
As you probably know here with some of these.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
And back up to minutes.
The minutes.
Minutes. All right, minutes. First one is, it's February.
Ron, I don't know if you want to read the items to
Sure.
approve the minutes.
Yes, minutes of the previous meeting, regular meeting from February,
February 20th,
February 20th,
2025.
2025. Move to approve the minutes. February 20th, 25.
Okay. Well, here,
I, got a motion
yeah.
to approve February's 2025 minutes of the Board of Health.
And I'll second. Vote,
Yes.
yes?
Aye,
Okay. Okay. That one's done.
that's done.
All
Okay,
right, that's the minutes.
all right. Report of the health director?
We have old
Business.
unfinished business. The Revisions to the private well
Oh,
regulations.
the wells, okay, okay. All right,
Okay.
I thought that was pretty good.
Okay, I want,
Do you have any questions on it?
not questions. Okay, you guys have to bear with me. All right, I'm going to go back to the PFAS.
Okay, all right.
All right. And I know this was brought up before, and I would not want to vote on anything without Kevin being here, so we can go back for further discussions next month. But what I wanted to consider was for newly dug
Established
wells,
new
dug wells,
Yeah.
that we require the PFAS. We were requiring for volatile organic compounds and the different things, but we aren't requiring PFAS for newly dug wells. And I guess my feeling is, even though we're all coming from the same aquifer, the areas can be different. And this doesn't just come from, let's say, you're an area next to an old dry cleaner or a gas station,
Sure.
right? This can be coming from seafood, all right? It can become the food we eat. It's coming from the clothes we wear. It's coming out in the wash. It's coming out in our wastewater. I just think somebody that's doing a new well that should be a requirement. That was what I want to bring up for the next time. And you can think about that, but that's my take on that. I know on here we have then, within a year, they would require a second one. My point would be, if nothing was found on the PFAS on the first one, you wouldn't need to do a second one. You wouldn't have to do it the second year, even though you were requiring it within a year, is the way I'm reading this.
Yeah, so you have your initial test
Yeah.
after installation, and then a year after it's operational, you have
Right.
another
And what I'm
test.
saying is, if you found something that first year, then yes, you would want to
Right.
test it again the second year. If you don't find anything the first year, you wouldn't need to do that. But I think we should,
Well, if you find it, you're gonna have to remediate for it.
Yeah.
So if it's over the threshold, you don't have a choice but to remediate. So there would be a testing process.
yes, and we can bring this up. And I want you to think about this till the next month, is what Carrie is bringing up, and I think it was very valid, is there's going to be cost to that remedial. If somebody finds it, the cost of cleaning it up. And I guess what I would put out there is, from a public health standpoint, a lot of people don't really know what PFAS is or how detrimental to the health it can be. So I guess my feeling is that's part of our responsibility as the board to see that people understand that, all right? And yes, it might be more expensive to clean it up, but to say, all right, if we don't test and we don't know it's there, it's not gonna hurt us. And that's not the case. That's what, what I'm saying is, not testing because it's gonna cost more money, to me, doesn't make sense.
Isn't it tested, aren't they testing for it now, though?
No, not PFAS, no.
In the drinking water, it's tested for, so the
Wouldn't-
town water
wouldn't the-
is
wouldn't the well-
tested, but not a
Wouldn't the well
private.
be part of the testing, though?
No, there's different requirements for private wells to test. So that's what
Oh,
you're,
I see, so
There
you want
used
to
to
add
be a
this into...
private well.
Okay.
And I'm saying is, when you're first digging that.
Sure.
We, as a responsible board, should require that
Yeah,
to
that
be
makes sense.
tested.
That makes sense.
To me, that makes sense. And I know what she's saying, yes, it's going to be more expense than if they have to have a remedial cleanup. But I think it's our responsibility to make sure that that person is aware just how devastating some of this PFAS can be. And I think there's more and more evidence coming out about that. And I guess my feeling is, I think it's something that we as the board should take the responsibility for and require that. And I think that needs to come up for discussion once Kevin is here and, give you a chance to think about it. Anybody listening that wants to come to the next meeting and,
the other thing that I would recommend before you make a decision is I would reach out to, and I'm going to do this, Barnstable County Water Quality, and find out their recommendation on whether testing a new well or an existing well changes. Like, is there any benefit to a new well versus an existing well?
oh, all right, because then I was going to, all right, that would have been my other point was requiring, I guess we do require testing when you're selling a property. All right?
Yep,
But
we have-
again, it's not PFAS.
No. So is it more beneficial to pull the samples at time of transfer versus a new well, or both?
How many
Because
new
if you're
wells do
gonna-
you get a year?
A year, maybe 3 new wells. There's not a lot.
And I think she said like the testing is like maybe let's say.
Couple $100
Couple
to
hundred,
do the
200-300.
testing.
However, if they would find that, the cleanup would be expensive. Chances are they're not going to find it, but I guess my feeling is,
It better be safe than sorry.
yes. And I think we as the board, that should be part of our responsibility to see that the people are as safe as they can be with their drinking water. And a lot of people don't even know what PFAS is. All right, and we're assuming that somebody that's drilling a well would know to say to the person drilling it, boy, when you have it tested, will you test for PFAS? Most people don't know to do that. And I guess that would be my concern, because I would think if I were doing that, I would want to know it. And I come back to young families with possible children that are going to be there a long time. What are the possibilities? And wouldn't it be better to find out beforehand than after? That's just my personal
No, that
opinion.
makes sense.
And,
No, I agree with that.
and, let's see what Kevin thinks and mull it over till next month. And if the people, if anybody is listening or listens afterwards, would want to come and add their point of view.
And just as a reminder, where Kevin missed this discussion, he will have to watch this meeting to be able to partake in next month's conversation.
Oh, he can't even participate in the conversation.
If, he's got to stay current on the conversations that have been had. So where
In other words,
he's absent
he
here,
has
he
to
needs to just
Listen
watch
to
the
these
meeting.
conversations.
Oh, so it's not like, even though we're not voting or deciding anything?
No, because you're having a discussion on it. He
Makes
needs to
sense.
be up to,
I'm sure
Right.
he's amenable to that.
oh, he can watch it for him to be able to
All right.
participate in next month. We just need to make sure that he's current.
That makes
Okay.
sense. That makes sense.
Sorry, Kevin. But like I said, I do feel very strongly about the PFAS. And I know the few people that do know feel strong about it. Most people, when you talk to them, they have no idea what it is or why. Or I think some people feel that, you know, they're looking at it like the volatile chemicals, that are there are certain areas, as opposed to, hey, you're exposed to them in your home, your clothing, it's going to come out in your wash.
So we'll reach out to Barnstable County Water Quality and
Yeah,
get
that'd
some
be good.
additional data for the board. And then we'll also bring the list of the 7
I think there's,
PFAS.
I think the state, I know that for sure I think they require 2 now, and I think they were upping it to 4 more. We can check with, I don't know who to check with now at the wastewater.
I'm
We-
sure-
and-
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Two what?
2 of the PFAS,
Oh,
yeah, and I think they've upped to the ones that are required, they're going to require or doing it, and I'm not sure if that's been to effect or not. But I don't know who the wastewater person, I don't know his name,
Jason.
Jason,
Yeah.
he would be able to tell us that. And, you know, as far as our town water is tested for certain ones, but like I said, the well water,
When did they stop using PFAS?
what do you mean?
It's in
They
everything.
stopped using it.
Oh, they haven't stopped.
I thought they,
The fire department has
The fire
PFAS.
department did, they aren't
They
using the
have,
spray.
yeah, the chemicals no longer contain PFAS,
that's my
but
point, yeah.
But that's still like some of the containers that you bring home food in contain it. It's in the clothing we wear.
it's in your soap if they have little beads.
All the soap that you use, whether it's hand soap or detergent, it's in so much of what we use that you don't know where it's concentrated and where it's not. And I think that, to me, is what would pose the problem. And I guess, again, I go back to, I think it's our responsibility to make that.
Have other towns picked this up, like Dennis and Orleans?
I don't know if any other communities are requiring PFAS testing. I know
wonder.
that Barnstable County is getting ready to do a voluntary program where they're going to look for private well owners, and they'll pull the samples for free for them to collect some data and point locations across the Cape.
That'd be very interesting.
It would be, but I don't necessarily think we have to be followers.
No,
Yeah.
what I'm bringing up is that, you know, it's opening up Pandora's box.
well, we've been a leader in a couple of things.
Yeah, and like I said, I think
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah, I don't have any problem with it, I just
Yeah.
was wondering, 'cause I know the fire department stopped
they
using
did,
it.
yes,
but-
yeah. But I know, and there's a lot of talk about, you know, getting rid of certain containers that your food is packaged in, or that you bring things home in, because that contains it. And it's a long way to go, but with that being said, it's in the environment. So who's to say where in the water it is or isn't?
But it's not in our drinking water, as
No,
far as we know, right?
no, it isn't.
So-
Of the wells they check, you know, and of what we're using.
No, but I'm regular
Yeah.
potable water that we use
Yes.
at homes.
Yeah, that's been checked and we're good.
Okay.
But you don't know in the outlining areas
Mm-hmm.
what their water would be. And like I said, chances are it will be negligible. And it wouldn't cost them more than $200-300. But,
Oh, well, if you transfer in a house, it's like nothing. right?
yeah. Yeah.
Something like that.
So anyway, that was just my thought
Do we
on,
want to make a motion or no?
So
Make
you
a
would
motion to
no.
Postpone it.
vote to continue
Go
until.
continue.
motion to continue.
Motion to continue,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
Motion to continue this discussion on private wells.
wells. Second?
Second,
Aye.
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 All right.
Okay.
All right, now where are we?
Report of the health director.
Yes.
So we're excited to announce that we have been working on our 2nd annual Health and Environment Fair.
Yes.
We are in the process of planning. We have partnered up with the Conservation Department and the Harwich Climate Action Network. The event will be on April 19th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. We currently have 37 organizations signed up to attend and offer information on their services. There will be food trucks, yard games, and the Easter Bunny is going to make an appearance, so everybody come on out.
The day before Easter.
This is a Saturday, the Saturday before Easter.
At the middle school, at the middle school.
Not the,
I work, you know, last year it was.
I'm sorry.
No, that's right.
It was at the middle school last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, at
Yeah,
the
that-
cultural, new
Yeah, I went to
cultural.
that, yeah.
That's exciting,
municipal
though.
That was
building,
good.
And where's
yes.
this one being held?
Middle
This is
school.
at the cultural, the 204 across from emergency safety building. The old middle school.
Middle school.
Oh, across, all right,
Yeah.
I know where it is, yeah,
I
all
went
right.
to that, yeah, I went to that last year, that was good.
We're taking over the whole building, so there'll be
Ooh.
stuff, there'll be lectures up in the library.
Last year, there was 10, 12 people.
Let's see if I can switch.
We had probably about 28.
Yeah. There's some people outside and
Some
some
people
people inside,
outside,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So we're gonna be up in the gym, so check out the gym. We're gonna be in the cafeteria, we're gonna be in the courtyard, we're gonna take over the whole building.
Oh, wow.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, April 19th.
That's a lot of organization, thank you.
It's been fun. It's nice to get to know these organizations and see what they offer, so.
Yep.
Oh, look, this is, okay.
We have permits.
So you can make a motion to approve the new licenses as listed below, if that's the
make-
way you would like to make your motion.
Make a motion to approve all the permits for the new licenses.
Second, vote, yes?
Yes?
Yes.
All right. And then the last one, a motion to
Adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
second?
Second, yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay.
We seem to have a lot of septic